The pursuit of happiness via wealth is just the treadmill keeps going, and it grows exponentially. So you think $500,000 a year will do it, then $1 million, then it's 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, $1 billion, and it never ends. And you keep going for it, and you're always wondering, is it just one more deal away? Is it another house away? Is it that vacation? And it's always elusive. And yet there is no place where you could say, hey, I need help. I have too much money. I'm struggling. I'm a money addict. There's no 12-step program for that. We have 12-step programs for almost everything. But this is one of the few things where, oh, you poor thing. Oh, you have too much money. You're spending too much time at work making millions.
What if everything you thought about money was wrong? We tell ourselves that just a little more will solve our problems. But what if that's the biggest delusion of all? Today, we sit down with Dr. Shloime Zimmerman, one of the most sought-after minds in human behavior, to unpack the hidden psychological traps of wealth, from billionaires chasing an impossible finish line to everyday earners feeling like they never have enough. This conversation will change everything you think about success. Dr. Zimmerman has spent years inside the minds of the ultra-wealthy, the financially struggling, and everyone in between. His insights are fascinating, unexpected, and honestly, might just change the way you think. Let's get into it. Being a Jew, awesome. Managing personal finances, not so awesome. Welcome to Kosher Money. Dr. Zimmerman, let me ask you, is money the solution to most problems?
Money is like marriage. It very much helps not being married, but it doesn't actually help with any other problems. So there are many, many problems that people have for lack of money, right? They have lack of access to care, childcare, they have trouble paying their bills, they might have a lot of stressors. But anything beyond that, money doesn't really solve. Yet, so many of us are under the illusion, come on, everybody says that, but if I only had some of their money, I would be fine. And that's one of the biggest illusions that humans struggle with.
What can money solve, right? Because someone who's poor that accumulates some level of wealth, they'll be able to fix problems. They'll have lodging, they'll have clothing, they'll have food. So it is true that money does fix some problems, right?
So again, absolutely going back to that basic step, money fixes the problems of not having money. So there are many stressors of not having money. If somebody, God forbid, can't pay their food or their electric or their housing costs, they're going to have enormous, enormous stressors. And that's going to link up with tremendous mental health problems as well, relationship issues, all sorts of issues. So getting out of the place where you're either in poverty or really struggling to make ends meet, money is huge in terms of helping with that. Once you start to get out of that position where you can already pay for your bills or you're managing your finances relatively well, then additional money has a very short ability to really solve other problems.
So what's that sweet spot? Is it being able to pay for your needs and you forget the wants? Or can money bring happiness or more happiness if it can also help you with your wants?
So it's a very important question, and there was a lot of debate in this actually in the research for years. And we used to have this set point, it was 75,000, then we said 90,000. And it turns out that money really can continue to help you ever so slightly, even way, way up into the earnings levels. But that being said, it only helps a tiny bit. And it largely helps you feel a little bit more satisfied in life, but it doesn't really impact your happiness or your psychological, emotional problems.
What do you see the problems that money begins to create as you start to accumulate deep into your wants?
So there are a number of issues that come up with going deep into your wants. So first of all, most of our wants are not really connected to our deep part of ourself. That's the true self, the essence of us, our healthy parts or our soul. It's usually part of us that really just desires more and more and more. And usually even that's in the hope that maybe if I get that, I'll feel better about myself or my life will be really improved. And it's sort of like a drug. You just keep chasing more and more and more, and it doesn't satisfy, and you need a higher and higher and higher dose. So it's not so much that it's a specific problem of higher wealth. We all struggle with that. Most of us, we wanted XYZ thing, we got it, and how long did it last in terms of really changing our lives? It just keeps going. People have this fantasy that, okay, if I'm really wealthy or at some point I had everything I wanted, then it would be okay. There's no such thing. I've never encountered it.
I joke with some friends who pay for their needs and could afford some wants that whenever they purchase something, I say, this is going to be the purchase to make you ultimately happy forever. This is the one. You're one purchase away from being happy.
So one of my clients who's from a very, very prominent and wealthy family, for years he would joke with me, like, wasn't so joking, they would say, 100 million will do it, Dr. Z. Just 100 million will do it. And he's connected to people well over $100 million, and it doesn't do it. And we don't know anybody almost nobody, I shouldn't say anybody, who got out of the rat race. How many people do you know that are down that path, what they call the hedonic treadmill? They just keep running after that thing, and who said, okay, I got it, I had enough, I'm heading out. It's almost impossible.
If you could be granted a wish and have unlimited wealth, based on what you've seen out there and human tendencies, would you take that wish?
So I think it's a crucial question people should ask themselves in general. And it's something I ask myself many times. What if money was no object?
Uh-huh.
What would you do with your life? More about not pursuing the money so much, but it helps you ground yourself as, am I doing something that's really important to me? So I've asked myself that many times. And I used to frame it as, what happens if I won Powerball? And so for me, I think the only big difference would be that I would probably open a school or maybe school system designed around really healthy, psychologically minded children, families. But fundamentally, vast majority of my life, I don't think would change that much.
What effects does money have on people that may not be as grounded as you are, right? Someone who's working, they're 30, 40 years old, they come into a lot of money. They didn't grow up with money, they didn't grow up poor, but now they have the ability to go on expensive vacations, they can build multiple homes, they can afford fancy cars. What effects does that have on people that may not be rooted in value or just never exposed to money like that?
So I think you alluded to it in the question in some way in terms of grounded. So much of this depends on the individual psyche. Because if a person is going after it with intention, he wants to build prosperity, he finds real deep meaning, purpose, connection in this. He's offering a product or service to the world that really is helpful to people, and he's expanding that outwards. So then there's growth from there. And then sort of other things are almost like a business expense. You take it with you, you go and you expand. For somebody who's chasing whatever you are attempting, if money is trying to fill a hole, it'll never do it. And so what happens for guys who have a deep-seated hole, they don't feel good about themselves. They feel inferior. They lack that self-worth. And they're thinking, when I make it, and in America, we call it when I'm successful, then I'll be okay. Then they hit into big money and they almost forced to do something with it. So I got to spend more. And maybe it's that party. Maybe it's that second house. Maybe it's the private jet. And they end up in a pretty deep spiral in terms of almost very similar to drug addicts, like more and more and more. And the hits are very powerful, but then the downs are awful. But you can't get out of it. You need more and more and more. And they find themselves spending incredible amounts of money, hoping for that high that they can hold on to. And both for them and their families, there are usually very, very steep costs, emotional costs attached to it.
What would you say differs between money and other addictions? Because other addictions do have those highs and lows. What differences do you see?
So I think one thing about money is incredibly important is that there is no money addiction officially. Everything else that if you go and you go ahead and spend way too much time, way too much energy to the expense of not spending time with friends or family or loved ones or giving up too much of yourself, then you're called an addict. If you do that with money, what are you called? Successful businessman. We
Right.
laud that. We applaud that. So really, in some ways, money is the most sanctioned drug in the world. You can pursue it ad infinitum. You can give up on everything and we'll say, wow, incredible. And again, many addictions have a very, very bad bottom. If you take an illicit drug, you can drop dead from certain ones, right? There's some real downers. Money doesn't have that immediate cost, but the pursuit of happiness via wealth is just the head treadmill keeps going, and it grows exponentially. So you think $500,000 a year will do it, then $1 million, then it's 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, a billion, and it never ends. And you keep going for it, and you're always wondering, is it just one more deal away? Is it another house away? Is it that vacation? And it's always elusive. And yet there is no place where you could say, hey, I need help. I have too much money. I'm struggling. I'm a money addict. There's no 12-step program for that. We have 12-step programs for almost everything. But this is one of the few things where, oh, you poor thing. Oh, you have too much money. You're spending too much time at work making millions. So you don't get any empathy or sympathy for it. You can barely talk about it. It's one of the most shameful things to talk about because the appearance to everybody is if you have money, you have it all. So who are you going to really tell? So it's actually one of the unique things in therapy for people who make a lot of money to really be able to talk about their human side is actually one of the few places on earth they can feel that they can talk about it at all.
On that note, I always wonder what the richest person in the world worries about, right? Elon Musk, many billions. Do you think his biggest worry as it relates to money is looking over his shoulder if he's still number one?
Absolutely. And again, I don't know Elon Musk's psychology, but I have it with some very, very high net worth individuals or families. It's very similar to almost like if you ever used to watch National Geographic and you see the alpha animal and then the younger pack is going at it and he goes into the boxing ring and he fights them a few times and comes out bloody, but he's still winning. And slowly but surely they chip away and they chip away. And sadly, we even have this even in our charity events. Sometimes somebody donates some large sum and he's king of the hill, or he makes this massive event and wow. And then the next one comes out and the next one. And it doesn't matter whether that's a new car you got, a bigger simcha you made, event, wedding, bar mitzvah, or charity event. There's always something else. One of my clients was in the process of buying an extraordinarily expensive private jet. And while he was purchasing it, he was frustrated by this other person who had an even nicer jet. And we all think, oh, that's ridiculous. But how many of us, while we were purchasing our car or our home, were thinking, yeah, it's nice, it's good, but can you only imagine? So the same human dynamics are at play for all of us. They're just on scale. We all have this fantasy that, no, it would scale out. If I had that much money, it would be all good. But every single one of our human elements and dynamics are going to be at play. They just grow in terms of kind and type and amount.
So behind closed doors, you're dealing with people, I want to say in the millions, but maybe even more than that, right?
So again, I love the fact that I have a very broad spectrum practice. I have many people who are on public assistance and charities are helping them pay for therapy. And I also do have clients who are anywhere from, right, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions a year, some who are worth 50, 100, and some of them are in families worth hundreds of millions, and some of them are billionaires. And they're all human. Harry Stack Sullivan was a famous psychologist many years ago. He said, we are all much more human than otherwise. We live with this fantasy that that'll be the kind of thing that takes me to a whole different place. I'll be a different person. When really we're all human. And yes, there are unique challenges and benefits of having lots of money, but they're fundamentally all the human problems. Anxieties, fears, insecurities, addictions, infidelities, all sorts of things are at play. Money doesn't make you not human anymore, doesn't make your desires go away, doesn't make your needs and psychological needs get taken care of. Yes, you don't have certain problems of money, but that's about it.
What are some of the other challenges you see behind closed doors as it relates to people that have a lot of money?
So a lot of it depends on how they got there. For people who are from families where there's a tremendous amount of money, there's often a lot of complexity as to how they got it. Did they really earn it? They just got it. Who is the successor to the patriarch of the family? Who gets to take over the business? Why were they passed over? Are they really in the position to make more money? How do they build how are they successful? How can you be successful if somebody already made tons and tons of money and has this huge philanthropic dent in the world? What can you do to be successful? So you're living with tremendous burden, tremendous pressure, and often a lot of familial tension and issues as to why is this one chosen? Why is not me? Is he really giving me a chance? Do they don't believe in me? How am I ever going to do it? How are we splitting this up? What happens in the next generation? And then for people who are doing it more on their own, building themselves up. So again, it's hard to tell chicken and egg. What's one of the most surprising things for me is that even for people with lots of money, money tends to be the biggest stressor. So I hear much more about money from my wealthy clients than from my clients who are of average income or even maybe on the poorer side. So many of them struggle with, how does my money make money? One of the most fascinating things for me was many times some of the wealthiest clients I have to, 1 second, doctors, I have to cover the bank. Cover the bank? What are you talking about? They have to make sure they have enough funds. I was like, I make sure I don't have to check that. Every so often I have to make sure. I make sure I have enough in my account to cover so I don't live full of stress. Their money always has to be making money. How's it going? So money pervades their psyche. And especially the ones who are so driven to be successful, to make money, they're often under tremendous pressure. How am I going to make more and more and more? And chicken and egg is unclear. What drives that? Is it that they got into money and now they hooked on this? Or really was there some desperate need that they're trying to fill, and that's why it just manifests in this stress? And it becomes very unclear. And for many of them, we try to unpack what's really motivating you. So a very prominent rabbi a number of years ago introduced me to a client he really wanted me to see. And this fellow is worth a lot of money, and his family is worth extraordinary amounts of money. And I forget if it was our first or second session, he was casually telling me that he was trying to execute a $500 million deal. And I said to him, why? And he looked at me like I was the patient. Something's deeply wrong with me. Like, what do you mean? A $500 million deal? And we went on for a few minutes. I just kept asking, what's the motivation? So what do you mean? It's a $500 million deal. And I kept probing, what's the motive? I said to him, you don't need the money. Your family doesn't need the money. They can support a few generations scot-free. What's the driving force? And he really never paused to think about that. He's so just far into it, and this is just so natural. He never looked at it. And what was very interesting is you start to peel back and you start to see there's a lot of unhealthy motivations there. You know how much stress comes along with a deal that size? You know how many issues and time and energy and staff and teams and multi-level businesses need to be arranged to carry something like that? Why do you want that? And a lot of it was to show that he's important, to show that he could best a different family member who was killing it. And then you say, hey, do you really want to keep scratching that itch? But again, it's fundamentally human. How many of us are competing against somebody, some figure in our head, trying to show that we're important, try to show up in our place of business or in our synagogue or wherever it is and say, I mean something, I matter. So money for many people is connected to mattering.
Sometimes that other person is our former self, right? Where I'm always blown away by someone who has millions of dollars. They're not happy with 6, 7, 8% returns, right? And I wonder, is that because in the past they've gotten 15 to 30%? So to go to 8%, the S&P 500, the average return, that's crazy. That's a downgrade. How can I downgrade? But if someone was true to themselves and they did have generational wealth, what's wrong with 8%? You're beating inflation. Your money is making money. Why do you think, in your estimation, they're not okay with basic 8%?
So it becomes a real question of what is the money for? So if the money is for safety, security, bringing good health, well-being to you, your family, to your community, so then slow and steady, safer returns can be fine. But most of the people who need to be there or are competing, they have a lot of other fuels in them. They need to be the best. They just heard about a guy who dates 50%. So 8%, I'm a loser. So it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you're not competing, you're not growing, you're not increasing the family net worth X-fold, you go back to that deficiency of, I'm not good enough. So I wish it was a former self. We all have a part of ourselves that says, you're not enough. Come on, you really worth anything? Come on. Yeah, you made that much money, but can you still be at it with the sharks? Can you really add value to this family? Or what's going to happen? And you'd be shocked how nervous somebody could be about the generational wealth and the transfer of wealth, even though they seemingly have money that would cover 5, 10 generations. The angst is very rarely about a logical question.
I was going to ask
There's
that.
an emotional fuel. There's psychological fuel. For most people, money isn't about covering their bases. Money symbolizes, am I successful or not? Do I have a seat at the table or not? What seat do I have? Yeah, I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to be alpha. I want to be at the top. And how do I maintain that? And how do you grow? And like you alluded to before in our conversation, there's always new people, there's always competition, there's always the threat of loss. So what is 8% going to do? But then again, there are the healthy, stable families who are some of the backbones of the Jewish people. Philanthropy, they want to have some part of their money go for moonshots and for huge returns, but they want to make sure that their money is protected and that if it's earning a steady return in a safe way, that they're good. And you could usually tell the difference. Those families have a very strong value to them. They've grown into this gradually. They have a very mature outlook on money, and money is a huge responsibility. Money isn't me, 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 me. Money is about God gave me a lot of money. That means he expects me to take care of a lot of his children. And I have to do that in a reasonable and responsible and secure fashion, not in a reckless fashion. So those are people who are really, really remarkable because, again, most of us think that, oh, a lot of money equals freedom. I expected most of these wealthy guys to come to my office whistling, came back from a golf game, chilled. Some of the most intense pressure. Now, some of them have intense pressures because they're unhealthy needs, and some of them have intense pressure. They're very healthy people, but they are shouldering huge responsibilities, not just for their families, but for enormous numbers of people and for institutions. And they really are holding up so many things behind the scenes where you heard about this big charity campaign or a donation or a large-scale donation. You don't understand the day-to-day responsibility that they shoulder, that if almost any major cause goes on, small and big, come through their doors, and everyone is relying on them. And that is a huge responsibility. And some of these people in the opposite direction, they're extremely strong and healthy, but they're shouldering a lot.
Maybe you've considered innovating a whole new way of operating your business, but dismissed it that it was just too hard. Time lost is profit lost, and scaling feels impossible. That's where BitBean comes in. Love the name. BitBean specializes in custom software solutions that solve your unique challenges. So, whether you're in healthcare, real estate, retail, or any industry that's drowning in data or complex processes and workflows, their expert team will work with you to understand your needs and create a better in-class system tailored to your business. Send my regards. I'm Ellie. Use my name. One client, a therapy company, was overwhelmed with managing fieldwork, government forms, and a back office workflow. Ew. BitBean built them a custom solution that streamlined everything, saved them time and money. It's time to stop chasing information and start innovating. Visit bitbean.com to see how they can help your business scale smarter. That's bitbean.com. Custom software solutions that work for you. Link and info in the show notes. Enjoy. When it comes to giving, it doesn't matter if you're donating $10 or $10 million. Everyone starts somewhere, right? Charity is something that unites us all in a shared purpose of helping others and uplifting our communities. Whether you're giving or receiving, we're ultimately one, right? We're connected by the values of generosity and compassion. And that's where the Donors Fund comes in. They believe that giving should be simple, impactful, and strategic. They provide tools to manage your charity smarter. It centralizes everything. We're still in the beginning of a new year, so now is the perfect time to set your charity goals and maximize your impact. And with the Donors Fund, you have just that. You can plan your giving strategically, ensuring every donation is as effective as possible. If you're holding appreciated stock, consider donating it instead of cash. You can avoid capital gains taxes while deducting the full fair market value, making your giving both tax efficient and impactful. The Donors Fund platform streamlines your giving journey with personalized support, flexible donation options, and tools to maximize your impact. Awesome mobile app. Whether you're supporting a local yeshiva or a global cause like Colel Chabad, or planning a legacy of giving, the Donors Fund helps you give with purpose. Start the year by setting up a donor-advised fund and experience the flexibility to allocate your donations thoughtfully throughout the year, all while enjoying significant tax benefits. Oh, and it's free. So whether you're just starting your journey of giving or managing a large portfolio of charity, the Donors Fund is here to help. Visit thedonorsfund.org/kosher money. The link's in the show notes, and make your giving more impactful for yourself, your family, and your community. The Donors Fund, giving smarter together. And now back to our great episode. Do you think that drive to want to get 15 to 30% returns from someone who's healthy can be because of healthy reasons, that it's not coming just to be better than someone else, be better than their former self, but because they just have this innate drive to continue growing, but it's potentially healthy, or is that oxymoron?
No, I think it's very possible, especially some of these very talented and very blessed business people have, like you said, seen those returns many times. And they're able to find a value add or a certain niche where they can get those returns. And for them, it's not reckless and it isn't just a moonshot. They've produced that. They've seen that. Now, sometimes markets are good to everybody, and everybody's source, but some of them have really done that year on year for many years. And for them, it can really come from a place of, I'm not maximizing the value for my family and for the Jewish people. There are other folks who, yeah, they're stuck on this grand return and doing that, and often they'll do more dangerous, more reckless things, and then there can be very, very, very heavy price to pay for that. I recently had a client who, unfortunately, very wealthy guy with a business that's very investment heavy. You have to put in a lot and very slowly turn over returns. And a lot of the deals, if this goes well, you can have these massive returns. And then, okay, one deal didn't pan. So you start borrowing to make sure you fund it and not lose it. And then another one and another one. And you start borrowing on higher and higher levels of interest. And a few of those ducks didn't go in a row and went out of a row. And now all of a sudden he is massively in debt to the tune of many, many millions of dollars. And all of a sudden he owes institutions massive amounts of money. And sadly, he owes a lot of individuals a lot of money. Some of them who are very big players who $1 million to $5 million here or there won't affect them. But some of these people are people who can't put food on their table and actually using that interest to pay down debts and things like that. And the whole ship is sinking and taking on what really, really fast. And part of that was this need to just generate more and more deals and go for these returns and take risks that really, looking back, were not reasonable. But the fuel was there. And we hear, unfortunately, a lot of these, some people who weren't trying to hurt anybody, or some people who desperate to run some high return scheme. And unfortunately, we are really struggling with that in profound ways. And people are shooting for the moon sometimes in ways that are not healthy for them or the people who they're doing business with.
How important slash impactful is the fact that many of the people you're meeting with are of the Jewish religion? How much of an advantage is that, because there's more to a dollar than the dollar, that we have a greater purpose, so that when they're expressing that to you and you're trying to educate them on getting out of the weeds and the day-to-day hustle, that it gives them something more to strive for versus just potentially just finding themselves, or you're giving them an actual or elucidating them to this greater mission.
So I think it's critical. There are very, very few people I encounter who are just chasing pure pleasure, who are not involved tremendously in communal issues, in charitable causes, and not to, okay, like you see in the non-Jewish world, they do some nominal donation, 0.01% of their net worth. Most of the people I'm talking about, 10% of their income is given. Most of them are giving well over 20%
To charity.
to charity. And more than just even their charitable donation, an enormous percentage of their time and energies are going to others. And I think that that's something that is a highly protective factor, because the more you pursue taking and having, the more miserable you actually are. One of the best ways psychologically, one of the biggest value adds you could get from money is actually to give it away. It's the paradox of money. One of the few things you could do to really utilize money for your well-being, yes, you can buy experiences, you can buy some added time so you don't have to be involved in mundane tasks. But one of the other biggest ticket items you could do is give it away. Because we all know this. When you're on the giving side, how do you feel? Feel amazing. And really, on the deepest level, you talked about our Jewish philosophy. God is the ultimate giver. So one of the ways that we emulate God the most is by giving. And one of the greatest vehicles for that is of our money, because money isn't just paper. What is money? Money is our longing. The Jewish word, one word for money is kesef, which really relates to longing. Another one is damim, which relates to dam, which is blood. You put your blood in it. So much of our blood, sweat, tears, hopes, aspirations are in money. What do we do with it then? So when you lift that up, you use it to support your family well, you use it to support others. You're taking this very mundane physical thing, but you're taking all of your energies and you're lifting it up for its ultimate purpose, to be a giver, to sustain others, to be godlike. And it's actually the most transformative thing a human could do. We often forget, even most of us as Jews, that I'm busy 40, 50, 60 hours a week and so much of my mental energy in work. We almost view it as like, is it a byproduct? Does God really want me just in praying or studying the Bible? And this is just some weird obstacle? It's the exact opposite. One of the biggest places of our mission and our purpose is to say, I want you to get into the physical realm. I want you to get into the business where it can become a boxing ring. And I want you to transform that into a place where it's not about you and taking and amassing as much as you can. I want you to focus on your mission and purpose. Make sure it's honest. Make sure you're dealing with integrity. Make sure it's giving versus taking. Make sure you're sharing prosperity, building something for others. When you do that, you're using money and your time and your energy and your talents for your ultimate purpose. And not only is it not, oh, money's the root of all evil, then money becomes an essential good. And it's not a mistake that God put us in a place where we're going to have to expend most of our waking hours a week for most people is going to be about earning a living. And if it's only about that, okay, I need to live. God supports all the animals and all other creations without having to work. It's a pretty strange phenomenon. He goofed up here. The pinnacle of creation, man, the one who can speak and who has knowledge and has a higher soul, and all he's doing the whole week is hustling for his food. It's the exact opposite. Hone in that that's a purpose. How do I lift this up? How do I focus on my mission and my purpose of bringing an honest day's work, bringing a good product to market, doing a good business deal, which means that, yes, we're all benefiting. Those are the kinds of things that uplift the mundane, which is really what Judaism's all about.
Beautiful. When someone accumulates wealth and they're in the office, their social life can take a hit, right? They're not seeing friends, but I think over time you end up becoming a little bit more reclusive, right? Going out into the streets means getting hit up for donations more and things of that nature. Always having to second guess what you're going to say. Is my company going to be impacted? I own stock, and if I say a certain thing, that might impact the value of that company. Do you see that behind closed doors, that social life takes a hit and it impacts them to the point where they don't feel like they used to because they're missing out on that?
So absolutely. The research is pretty clear that that's one of the major issues with wealth is you become a bit paranoid and not trusting of relationships. And you see that very much in the therapy room, because how do you trust that somebody really wants to be your friend or really has a vested interest in you rather than either getting a deal out of you or getting a check for donation out of you? It becomes a very, very big challenge. It's been very interesting for me that a lot of the people I work with who have a lot of money, their closest friends are friends they had from before they had money. That high school buddy of mine who doesn't think of me as this alpha dog or doesn't want anything from me. He knows me as, hey, Ellie, what's going on? And he can joke with me or kid me. Those are the people they feel safest with. And later, it becomes very, very challenging. What are they really in for? I was invited to a lunch with the CEO of one of the largest philanthropic Jewish foundations. So this guy's in charge of dispersing close to $100 million a year. And it was surprising to me because it was at this convention and everyone was hitting him up and everyone came to say hello and the biggest smiles and this and that. And then I couldn't figure out, like, why on earth is this guy having lunch with me? Everybody there wants to have lunch with him. And I said to him, wow, it's so interesting. Everybody's coming around to you the whole day. It seems like everybody wants something for you. And he's like, exactly. Everybody wants something from me. I was the only guy in the room who didn't have an organization, didn't have something that needed funding. And so He sat with me because I was the only safe person there. But psychologically it was profound. While I was sitting with him, I was thinking, I need to come up with a cause. I need to hit him up for something. Like, what am I going to do? It's such a lost opportunity. Sadly, from his perspective, that's his whole life. And it becomes very challenging because you can't trust. And even today becomes even harder because even these beautiful causes that you want to support, but when they come and say, hey, friend, how are you? And maybe it's even a big rabbi who comes and gives you this beautiful hello. How much of that's because of me? How much of that's because of my money? What would happen if I lost all my money tomorrow? Would people still come for my brilliant advice? And would they come to my house for a visit? That's a real challenge. And there's something real there. It's not just some neurotic fear, but a lot of them, it does become more and more neurotic, especially, again, if they don't have that mission, purpose, healthy-oriented business. Some people are in a boxing ring. One of my clients who is an extremely wealthy family, one of the few people I ever dealt with who sort of got out of the rat race for a while, he said, can you imagine such a thing where every single day people would get into the town square, they would punch themselves silly, everyone come out bleeding, one guy is crowned the winner, and the next day they would patch up their wounds and redo it and redo it and redo it. He says, right, so normally that's like UFC. We don't think of that as people making millions and billions of dollars. He said that's what's going on in these businesses. It's sharks and they're biting at each other. And the top guy who has ice in his veins is the winner. That leads to destruction because you can't trust anybody. It's a war. It's a zero-sum game. That is the antithesis of what money and business are really supposed to be about. And then you have people who are really good at saying prosperity-driven, honesty, integrity. Yes, I'm not going to let you take advantage of me. We're going to try to do a really good deal. And those are partnerships you see thrive and build. And those are people you see people wanting to do work with them, not because I could just extract a dollar, but because look at what it's like to partner with them. And those are people what we would call walking Kiddush Hashem. They sanctify God's name because people say, wow, you should go do business with him. That's the most honest guy I know. That guy has a tremendous integrity. Yes, he'll be a hard negotiator, but you're going to get good value there. That's something amazing.
Sounds like if Dr. Zimmerman won the lottery, you probably wouldn't tell anyone.
That's something I've thought out many times that, yeah, I would be very careful about that. Put it into some sort of trust. Have most of it just go to charity. Set up things very slow, long term, and also ask for a lot of advice from other people because you become so biased to your own thinking and your own desires and your own longing that you lose your way very, very quickly.
How would you deal with your children, your spouse? They all would know that the family has a lot of money and somewhat suddenly. How would you either break the news to them? How would you ensure that your life doesn't change, assuming you probably don't want it to change too much? How would you set that expectation?
We all like to play the fantasy game. And I've actually played this out in my fantasies many times. I think for so many of us, it's so important about what's the real life value? What do we discuss at our meals? How do we live our lives? If a therapist asked your kid in the confidential confines of that therapy room, what are mom and dad's values? How do they look at wealth or what are they pursuing? What would they answer? And it's a very uncomfortable question for a lot of us. Like, what do we really value? And most of us say, no, because I just need the money to do X, Y, Z. But is that really true? Or what are we living for? And I hope that I would set an expectation that this is now a tremendous gift, but every gift can be a tremendous curse. It is a tremendous responsibility. One of our Jewish teachings is we're all a family. So if somebody in a remotely healthy, stable family, if the father leaves over 98% of his wealth to one of the sons in the will, what does that mean? He's the executor of the will. He's in charge of taking care of the family. If God gives somebody incredible wealth, he's saying, you're the executor. I'm giving you a tremendous amount. It's not for you. It's for you to use your talents, your strengths, and this money to benefit others. So I would hope to set a very strong benchmark of we're blessed. This is tremendous. How are we going to help the Jewish people in the best way possible with our specific wants, passions, what we see as the needs of the people, and focus on that.
Do you think Jewish parents often send mixed signals? Because internally we do have those values, but we do have an evil inclination. We do have human tendencies, whether it comes to cars, purchases, things of that nature. Do you think children sometimes look up and say, hey, you say this, but you do that?
So I think, like you said, first of all, our children know us better than we know ourselves often because they're living and they're less hypocritical. We, like you said, we have two components to us. In the Jewish faith, we believe we're essentially a soul, divine image, and we have the dark side. We don't like to address that. We like to pretend that that's not part of us. But at every level, both on our most basic soul level, so we're going to pursue physical, we're physical body. We're going to pursue food and drink and intimacy and all that kind of basic stuff. And then as you go up the soul level, you're going to need an evil inclination for that. And that's going to be ego, power, control, domination, succeeding, being better than. And that's going to be always, every single second, we're going to be challenged by those elements in our lives. And we always going to have to deal with that. We have those two parts of us. And Judaism doesn't say, oh, pretend you don't have part, or it's all about lifting that up. How do I take those drives and sublimate them into a healthy way? And so, yes, I think we often send extremely confusing messages to our kids because we'll talk about the value of learning Torah or the value of philanthropy, and then we're scrambling around for this name brand piece of clothing, or we're wow, oohing and eyeing about this person made this wedding or bar mitzvah. And I think sadly, even our Jewish publications today, right? So everyone talks about, social media and its effects. So maybe a lot of the right-wing families in the Jewish community or the Orthodox community don't have social media. But if you look at any Jewish publication today, you will open one page and see, wow, the saintliness of this rabbi who's dedicated just to studying Torah, and this person who's unbelievable philanthropy. And then you'll see an incredibly expensive Pesach program, vacation, article of clothing. And I say, if an alien came down to earth and opened up just our Orthodox Jewish publications and was asked innocently, what are the values? I think it would be incredibly confusing. And I think at this point, if we're honest, it would probably be, you can have it all. You can be unbelievably religious and have a $300 cheesecake. You can have this amazing spiritual Passover experience, and you can go away for a $250,000 Pesach program. And we know that those two things don't go hand in hand. And you're going to pay a price. And our kids are getting very, very, very confusing messages from us, from what we're putting out there. And again, it's not any publication's fault because we're setting the market. And we're buying them, and we're buying the advertisers are not doing a kindness. They're making money because people are buying from these things. And it becomes a big question. I actually used to have almost none of these Jewish publications in my house. And my kids were asking for them, and I started to have them. And I really struggle with, did I net out positively or not? On one hand, they get all this information and all these beautiful stories. On the other hand, they get this exposure and this sense that this is now the standard. And it is not healthy. And one of the things, I live in Queens, and one of the things I love about Queens was that it was very not in your face. And there was a very big spread in terms of socioeconomic status, and people really didn't do ostentatious things. And I'm feeling the pulls of other places and the impacts, and it's becoming more and more evident even in my neighborhood and even in my children's schools. And both I'm guilty of that too. I like nice things. I like to look good. I like to buy things. I like to go on vacation. I'm not this saintly guy but it's a pervasive issue that every parent, I think, needs to be mindful of. But less in terms of optics. As parents say, okay, we won't talk about it at the table. The kids know what's inside of us. And I think all of us need to work on being more authentic, more healthy, more genuine, and living more in accordance with our value system.
So it's not enough to make your kids fly coach when you're going to an exotic destination for Pesach, right? That's not the instillment you're referring to.
Right. We try to get off easy. We try to do a slogan. We try to do a token charity event. The kids have a sense of our real values, and we're going to have to look in the mirror and do a real introspection. Where am I headed? Why am I pursuing this? What's this about for me? Am I happy when I see somebody else make a nice event, or am I really jealous? And to what degree is it both? Now, we're all human. We're all going to have jealousy. We're all going to have envy. We're all going to struggle with competition. But the question is, am I trying to refocus my attention inward and upward? Am I trying to really say, what am I really here for? What's this really about? How do I bring this up higher level, morally, ethically, to God? Or am I really saying, I just want to keep up with the Joneses, and I'm so busy trying to feel like I matter, which is really an ego thing that we all struggle with. Every single one of us has it. But the question is, how are you dealing with it? Are you acknowledging it? Are you owning it? And that's another important thing for our kids, because we like to go to one extreme or the other. Like to say, no, this is all bad, or you can't have that. Kids need to know that the desire for these things is perfectly human and normal. We're all going to struggle with it. We're always going to have it. And indulging in some of it is critical and healthy and normal and balanced. And at the same time, you always have to be careful, because it can easily take over your life. And again, it's that sanctioned addiction. You'll just fall into it, and everybody will laud you and they'll praise you. And it'll only be years down the line when you're in some therapy office being like, what did I spend my time doing? Tragically, the data shows us, and these are even from hospice nurses, people who are very close to death, one of their most common regrets is, I worked way too much. The second most common regret, and particularly amongst men, it's almost universal. Very few people at the end of their lives look back and say, I wish I worked more. I wish I made another few dollars. So much of the time they look back and say, I wish I worked less. I wish I wasn't so invested in just the money or amassing. I wish I spent more time with family. I wish I dedicated more of my life to higher level mission, to God. I wish I was there. I wish I even just took the time to breathe in and enjoy nature and beauty. That's the kinds of things that we regret at the end of our lives. But again, we all know this, but we kick it down the field. We need constant reminders, and we need to actually practically do things that ground us in ourselves and in our mission and in our lives and in a balanced, healthy way.
Fascinating. I always wonder, my children aren't of marriageable age, and I'm certainly not wealthy, but do you think rich families should be matchmake with other rich families, or do they have such different outlooks, situations, that it's completely two galaxies coming together and it wouldn't work?
I'm actually going to nitpick on part of your question. It's an
Go for it.
occupational hazard, because
Go
I'm like a
ahead.
psychologist. If you're okay with me
Yeah,
turning
sure.
this on you, like for a
Yes.
second. You said you're actually not wealthy. So this is one of the most interesting findings for me. Let's play with this for a moment. If I can ask you a personal question. Do you make more than $125,000 a year?
Yes.
Okay. So just statistically, you're in the top 10% of global earners as we speak. And we are now in the wealthiest society pretty much ever known to man. You have access to conveniences and luxuries and medicine and health and homes and cars and flying, and the device in your pocket can do something that nobody in history ever imagined. You're literally, in historical terms, in the 0.00001% of the wealthiest people to ever live. Do you feel that way?
No.
What was interesting for me is the same thing happened from all my wealthy clients. I was waiting, okay, this guy's going to feel wealthy. This guy's going to feel, no, I am wealthy. It's not built in. You talked about that Yetzer Hara. We have this sort of evil inclination. The evil inclination always said, not enough. It's never enough. You're not really wealthy. You're not satisfied. More and more and more and more. And the Torah teaches us, who is wealthy? He's happy with what he has. We all think, no, if I hit that benchmark. And the shocking thing to me was, I literally thought, okay, maybe it's $1 million a year. It's $5 million. You have $50 million. $100 million. They're always, I'm not wealthy. You can have 2 billionaires. We actually had this in an office. One of them's worth a few billion. One of them's worth double-digit billion. One will walk out and say, wow, that guy's rich. That is the human condition. And again, everything goes to scale. But let's go back to, so just a fascinating thing. But to go to this idea of who should they sort of marry, again, I'm very not into 20-second sound bites to solve life's issues. Okay, rich people should marry rich people, poor people marry poor people. There are big benefits to having a similar background, to having similar expectations, to having some clue, okay, these are expenditures, this is the kind of lifestyle I'm used to. And there are big problems when you have two people who are too similar and they want to create a more value-oriented, and they have no clue how to do that because they're both used to this. So I think it's much more about two people connecting in a real way. I do think they often don't realize any big difference in background, in family style, in personality style. We often think, oh, right, we say opposites attract. Nah, that's a little tricky. Yeah, you might attract, and then afterwards it's like very complicated to live with that person. And most of our time we realize, wow, my spouse is a lot more opposite than I thought or I signed up for. And so certainly if you have huge discrepancies in just expectations, norms, lifestyle, you could talk about it from today till tomorrow. You're going to have some real struggles. But at the same time, I don't think it's a healthy thing. Okay, we must encourage mergers. Okay, so now we're not just merging companies to advance, we have to merge our families to advance. I think that often sets up more and more pursuing unhealthy things. And I think the families that are healthier, they pursue value. They want to see a good quality person, a person dedicated to value, a person who's going to take care of their children and grandchildren. And those are the marriages that do better. When you marry for the merger, again, or a trophy spouse in any which way, that is like the drug. It feels really good, and then it doesn't deal with any of the issues you actually have, and they almost always have massive struggles attached to it.
A quick break with a word from my friends at Twillory. You know what I love about Twillory's website. You never know what they've got cooking at any given time. It could be a site-wide sale, a flash sale, or a drop in coat prices. There's always something exciting happening. But here's what I do know. If you're a first-time buyer, you can use code CHAI to get $18 off your purchase of $139 or more. Do not use the word INSPIRE because that is Yaakov's promo code, and I'm going to try to beat him here in 2025. So use the promo code CHAI, $18 off of $139 or more at Twillory.com/kosher money. Make sure you go to that URL so I get the credit and I beat Yaakov. I'm a huge fan of their vests. You've seen me wearing it, especially in the winter like this. It's perfect for staying warm and looking sharp. But hey, maybe you're listening to this in the summer of 2027 and wondering what they've got for the warmer months. Check out their air suit. It's lightweight, breathable, and stylish. And if it's 2027, they probably have a whole lot more in store. With Twillory, you're getting new clothing, new styles, and quality that lasts, so you don't have to keep running back to the store every few months. By the way, I heard they're actually building a new store, but we'll get more on that later. Go to Twillory.com/kosher money. You're welcome. Imagine being a child trying to focus on school or a play, but all you can think about is, will there be dinner tonight? And now imagine that stress compounded by the fear and uncertainty of war. For too many children in Israel, this is their daily reality. The anxiety of food insecurity, combined with the turmoil of conflict, robs them of the stability they deserve. They're children, for heaven's sake. But Colel Chabad is stepping in. They are Israel's oldest charity, and they are ensuring children have consistent access to nutritious food, even during times like this. When food security is in place, everything changes for the children. They can focus in school, build confidence, engage with their friends, and stress goes down. Self-esteem goes up. They thrive emotionally, mentally, academically, in all ways. Colel Chabad isn't just providing meals. They're providing hope, stability, and a sense of safety when it's needed most. You can be a part of this life-changing mission with just a few dollars or a lot. Visit kohelchabad.org/kosher money. Give the families the security they need and the children the futures they deserve. That's kohelchabad.org/kosher money. No dollar amount is too little or too high. Give, give, give. This money goes to an amazing place. I've seen it firsthand. I've been to their pantries in Israel. I see pictures, emails, videos all day and night. They are assisting because of people like you. Thank you. And now back to this week's episode. You've sat with many people that have accumulated wealth, right? Whether you want to call them successful, how America deems them to be, but people that, when you look in their bank account, they have quite a few zeros. Do you see any common traits between people that are successful in business, or is it completely random? You'll have people that have very high IQs and very low IQs. It's completely good fortune, and obviously everything is from Hashem, but by the nature of it, do you see any similarities?
So again, I'm going to go back to the thing in your question because you
No
actually
problem.
hit on a pet peeve of mine. In America, we call them successful. And I think there's a reason we call them successful, because we've invested so much in that. If you make money, you're a successful person. But I think if you think about that for even 10 seconds, it's like, really? Is that what we want to term as a successful person? Is that what we want? And one of the telltale signs is if you go to a funeral, you'll hear very few conversations about, how much money they amassed, how many zeros they had in their bank account. You'll almost never hear that in terms of a person's at their end of their life, what people are going to say about them. Why not? Because for so many of us, we're sticking to, what are called resume values. I want to build successful, successful, successful. And we're not sticking to the ultimate values, those eulogy values, as David Brooks calls it. What makes up for a really good life? And I think it would be important, especially like we talked about for parents, to really stop using the word successful regarding money. It sends a very toxic message and a very confusing message, because we'll talk about God and we'll talk about philanthropy. And then what's the only thing we call successful in our world? People with money. I think we have to do more than the labeling of successful, not successful. I think we better do a real deep introspection as to why is that we call it that way. To go on to your more general question, it is a very confusing thing in terms of there are certainly some characteristics that seem to be connected. But it's strange because definitely the smartest people I know are definitely not the wealthiest. Okay? And the hardest working people, the hardest working person I know is actually the woman who cleans my house. She literally works unbelievably. And she's one of the poorest people that I know.
Well, you could change that.
Yes, there's a whole philosophy of changing that's going to destroy the world if we do that. But yeah, so it's definitely not this simple thing. Warren Buffett, in his Giving Pledge, which is a phenomenal piece people should read, he describes that, particularly in America, a military serviceman who saves somebody's life gets honored with a medal. A teacher gets a thank you note. And somebody who can track mispriced commodities will earn billions of dollars. So there's definitely some capriciousness. There's definitely some, divine intervention that really is not. But that being said, they actually cite from the Lchaim that one of the things that we consider predetermined in Judaism is how much money you'll make. And sometimes you'll see this person says, come on, get up, you're lazy, come on, if you would only push harder and harder and harder, you'd make more money. And actually, the Lchaim says, part of the reason he has that sluggish personality is because he's predestined not to be wealthy. So there is a constellation. You definitely do see people hustling. You definitely do see a level of intelligence. You definitely do see a level of being able to build relationships, to do some sales, to really work. But how much of that is, again, just the divine saying, yes, I'm setting you up? There are definitely a constellation of factors, but it's not so easy to peg. And like most things, psychologists, we're great at going retrospectively. Oh, I could figure out why this guy made a lot of money. Go take a random sample of, 1,000 yeshiva kids right now and tell me which ones are really going to make money. You're not going to do so great. Now, of course, you will see some who are much more likely to have, let's say, long-term careers and be able to have a decent living. But which one is really going to kill it? Which one's going to crash and burn? Or which one's going to make who knows what? You have a very hard time predicting that.
What's your personal relationship with money? I mean, I don't know where and how you grew up, but have you always been the same with money personally, or has that changed over the years?
My dad actually is a financial planner, but yet I feel like the famous line about the shoemaker's kids, he didn't really teach us anything about money. But that being said, I mean, he's life insurance, financial
Looks like he did a
planning.
good job just in general. So
But
shout out to him.
Shout out to mom and dad, 100%. But I think a few things stick out to me, especially from my youth. One thing is that I grew up still in the shadow of the Holocaust. So my grandparents were all Holocaust survivors. And these were people who literally built from nothing. And so every dollar was significant. And many of them were bright, capable, intelligent people who came here, didn't speak a language, and had to do very mundane. One of my grandfathers was a roofer. One worked in a sweater factory. Like you're talking about people who penny pinched. And I remember them cutting this coupon and going to this sale. And anytime all they wanted for their children was a better future. And they were very big on education and finding a way to be more successful. So I didn't realize until recently how profound an effect that had on seeing the real time value of money and the other values of money. And you didn't spend frivolously. There was no such thing. How could you spend frivolously, even if they gathered some money together? And I think so my parents' generation were much more grounded in that way too, that they were all living in this, okay, we have to rebuild and every dollar counts. And certainly we always grew up middle class in some way. I never felt deprived, but there was no concept of just going into a retail store and paying full price. You looked for a sale. You had to have value to why you were spending. And so in some ways, I remember as a teen especially, I got very into fashion and I would chase sales, and God knows how much time and energy I put into trying to catch something on sale. It was probably not so healthy. But there wasn't this just money's a free-for-all. My dad, in some ways, very conservative. So we always lived in a 2-family house with an office in the basement. My dad always prided himself that on the first of the month, everybody else is nervous because their rent is due, and he was collecting rent. At the flip side, we lived in our whole lives in a 3-bedroom apartment with the whole family. It was years later when we converted the basement, there was a doctor's office, into a space we could play in. It was like, woo, So on one hand, I was like, come on, why can't we live nicer, bigger? But there was a certain, he always said, I don't want to be nervous. And I think that definitely had an impact. But he also had a line in Yiddish was called, we're from Gebevitz, not Nemovitz. We're from those who give, not the takers. There was a pride in being able to not be full of debt, not have to take and to give. Those were very strong values. But at the same time, it definitely had a certain effect in terms of even what was normal. When my wife had a very different experience growing up. And so even when we first got married, so one of the things that didn't have value was a drink in a pizza store. Because why take a fountain soda for 99 cents? You could those days get a 2-liter bottle of soda for 99 cents. So I would sheepishly never buy a soda. And my wife was looking at me like, she's ordering a Snapple in the water. And like, I'm looking at her like, you spendthrift. And she's looking at me like, what's like, we're having pizza. Like, why can't you order a drink? You don't even realize how much your upbringing shapes you. Like our first shopping experience was, it's to this day, it's comical. It's 20 years ago. But, she grew up where her family was not into giving them junk food. My family had tons of junk food, but her family didn't really look at prices in the grocery. My family, we did. I remember we went to Key Food together, and I'm looking at the price of this, that, and the other thing, and she's just pouring in sugar cereals and donuts, and like there's 2 of us, and I'm looking like, and like I had the speech from the customer rabbi, like don't say anything. I'm looking at what is going on here, and like she was finally free, and I'm finally like, oh my gosh, we're 2 people in graduate school, we're gonna starve to death. And it took a lot for us to sort that through. And I think now I definitely try to find a balance where I don't want to be always desperately looking for a sale and can't enjoy a cup of soda at a restaurant. And at the same time, I don't want money to just be a free-for-all. Oh, you just spend it. And I find it hard to find that balance. But one thing recently in my life, and this is very recent, I remember recently feeling that, like, if I was honest with myself, I don't know if God gave me more money, would I still be able to stay balanced and do good with it? I reached Baruch Hashem, I can pay my bills. I can put away a little bit. Of course, my wife has to work full time, even though I make a very, very nice living. It's a very heavy burden, full Orthodox Jewish family. But realistically speaking, I don't know if it would make me a better person, a better Jew, a better society member. Of course, I could just do more. But knowing myself, I was thankful to God. I said, God, I really have some tremendous appreciation for what you've given me. And that's been a really turning point to feel like I really have everything that I need plus. And I can do my mission in this world. There's something that brings on a certain serenity and peace that's tremendous. Now, of course, I could lapse into, oh, I want that, and I want that. And I pulled into this lot, and there was a Porsche there. I was like, oh, who's got a Porsche? And of course, I'm very human. But having even tasted that feeling of God's given me everything I need for my purpose in this world, that's priceless.
Love it. You got a lot going on. You have your own podcast therapy with Dr. Z on the Living Lchaim network. You got books. Would love to hear a little bit about the books you've written if people are interested. But before we get there, if someone does have a follow-up question, are you contactable? Some people, are overwhelmed as it is, so won't hold you to it.
They're both true. I'm fairly overwhelmed as it is, but I'm contactable. Some people need to be persistent and pursue that. I do also, especially for people in need these days, especially, I don't really take on long-term clients. I do short-term consultations, like 1 to 3 sessions. So if people can avail themselves of that. And so in that case, my office phone number is 718-338-4477. And my personal email is Steven, Steven, at Zimmerman, Zimmerman, 1.com. People can also find me via my website is CAPS, CAAPS, really is for Child and Adult Psychological Services, CAAPSgroup.com, capsgroup.com, and there's a contact form there with the phone number, so that's an easy place. And also a tremendous amount of speeches, podcasts, links to the book and other things are on that website. So it's actually a very good resource for people. There's a lot of different things on there.
So we'll put all that information in the show notes for somebody that doesn't have a pen and is doing
Right.
about 65 on the Palisades right now.
Exactly. So I wrote one book. There might be others down pipeline. That book is called From Boys to Men. And that's a book for Jewish parents and educators to talk to children and adolescents about puberty, sexuality, body changes, and how to deal with that whole area of struggle. And that is a groundbreaking book, particularly for the center and right-wing Orthodox Jewish community, where there's a desperate need to actually speak about these things, and people have no idea how to do that, or that it was rabbinically sanctioned to do that. And we go through both the conversation points as the first part of the book of make it easy for parents, how you can go have these necessary conversations. And then the second half is how do you deal with the ongoing struggles that every healthy boy is going and young man is going to have. And that has been absolutely groundbreaking. We just ordered the 5th reprinting and it's less than 2 years old. And thankfully we were on the That's an Issue, and just enormous amounts of people looking for this information. And I've had the privilege of going basically around the world to speak about this to parents and communities and educational institutions. So that's been unbelievable. And the response is just really incredible. Parents all over the place come and say, wow, the conversation went so much easier than I ever thought. The other thing is, oh, wow, I can't believe it. My kid opened to me up about bullying, about abuse prevention, about all these topics that we couldn't talk about. Now that parents could show up and be there for their kids, it's transformative. The whole relationship changes. The shocking thing about that book is that the biggest thing I didn't expect was that many adults, about 20 to 50 years old, come to me, sometimes even in tears, and say, if I would have heard 2, 3, 4 lines in that book when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, my whole life would have been changed. And so we're really hoping that has tremendous impact. In terms of, you talked about the podcast therapy with doctors, it's been beautiful to be part of the Living Lchaim network. And really it grew out of, I did the 2nd episode for That's an Issue. And I'm used to working very gradually and slowly with people one-on-one in a practice, many times for months, sometimes for years, to get people over a hump. And here I was able to talk to 20, 30, 40,000 people. So of course it's a whole different qualitative kind of thing, but to be able to reach the masses in such a way is such an incredible opportunity. And Yaakov and I discussed, some podcast ideas, and podcast therapy is really this most sanctified space, the therapy room, that sort of initial session. What is therapy like? Or what is the kind of advice people get? Or what are the struggles people have? Can we give people a little bit of a glimpse in that? And this is the closest real glimpse you could get with, it's still a podcast, but it really is people with real life issues calling me. I basically know nothing about them beforehand other than the basic issue to make sure, we can deal with it appropriately. And we go as if, hey, what's going on? How can I be of assistance? I try to make every episode have a takeaway for a broader audience, not just that specific problem, but the feedback has been phenomenal that people really connect and feel like, wow, I can relate to this problem or even a problem I don't have. Just it's like free group therapy. You could hear about all these different problems and learn from them. And also, I think I have a very unique take in terms of therapy. I tend to be much more open, direct, assertive and Jewishly minded than the typical therapist. So I do think there's a certain specific value add, and I really do try to make sure there's a takeaway that somebody could always go home with. My regular full-time day job is I do run a group psychotherapy practice, multiple offices in Brooklyn, Queens, and I've a team of therapists that work together with me, and I do a lot of consultations, second opinions, treatment planning, crisis intervention, and my team carries out ongoing therapy. And then lastly, I run a rabbinic training program for an organization called Simha, Sephardic Initiative for Mental Health Awareness, where we train rabbis in terms of mental health awareness and rabbinic counseling. And that's also a game changer for the right-wing Jewish community, rabbis who are already rabbis, to really start to learn how to confront the issue of the day, which is mental health, which everybody's struggling with.
I should have asked you, what don't you do? And we would have saved the last 5 minutes. But it's actually very interesting. We're going to put links to the book, to the episode that you did, which I think they titled the Jewish Guide to the Talk. And I don't listen to podcasts, I promise. And I accidentally clicked on the video recently. And, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then I just kept listening and listening. My wife actually read the book a couple years ago, and she's like, you have to read it. So now with my second boy, he's 10 years old, and I heard on the episode, which you said, I think it's the right time to have the talk, especially he's going to camp. I said, okay, I got to read the book. But it's phenomenal. You speak very well, eloquently, and you deliver it in a way that gets people thinking. So definitely check it out for those listening. We're going to put all the contact info into the show notes, and I do think an episode like this can open a lot of people's minds. So thank you for coming in the snowy weather here in 2025. And if people are going to be listening to this in 28, 29, 30, so cannot thank you enough for educating the masses. He did say 20 to 40,000. The episode just on video is well over 40,000 views, and then on audio, it's doing phenomenally as well. So thank you for this, and thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom with the world.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for what you do, because this is a different taboo topic that really nobody talks about. And it's almost as close to the intimacy issue, which is money, and the ability of bringing people awareness and how to deal with money, especially both for the Jewish and broader world, has been transformative.
If you would have had that compliment going another minute or two, I would have put it in the beginning. No. Okay. Thank you so much, Doc. Really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you for listening to a smash-tastic episode of Kosher Money. If you'd like to be entered for the chance to win an awesome and free Dave Ramsey book, head over to YouTube. If you're on YouTube, great. We're going to pick 3 commenters who include one of the following 2 words, either wealth or money. Use those words however you'd like, wealth or money, and we'll pick 3 of you to win a Dave Ramsey book. Congrats to the last 3 winners of a Dave Ramsey book from our last episode. They commented on our last episode, and they've won a free book. What are their usernames on YouTube? Bremerton Real Estate, Booker T1, and Rakyle Mahoney. Hit us up on livingLchaim.com, and we'll get those books out to you. Thank you to the sponsors of this week's episode: BitBean for custom software solutions, the Donors Fund, an amazing charity giving platform, Twillory, super comfortable and durable men's clothing, and Friends of Colel Chabad, who are supporting Israel with much-needed food and resources. Check them all out by clicking the links in the show notes. We put a lot of stuff in the show notes, so if you're looking for links, contact info, check there. Oh, and if you're thinking about your finances, whether you need help budgeting, tackling debt, or just want to chat with a financial advisor, the OU's livingsmarterjewish.org website offers free resources and has already assisted thousands of people in navigating their financial journeys. Don't be shy. I've done it. Many people just like us. Reach out to info@livingsmarterjewish.org or check out their website and schedule. It's free and it's awesome. If you love the Kosher Money podcast, you can help us reach more listeners by giving us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Your rating helps boost our visibility in the algorithm, and that's essential for keeping this podcast going. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Thanks so much for your support. If you want even more Kosher Money, you can join our premium membership on YouTube, where you'll get early access to episodes and other exciting perks. Dozens of you have already subscribed. I think it's like less than $5 a month. But if you can't afford it or you don't want to, don't. All good. We're constantly adding more benefits there, so shout out to our members. And hey, I want to tell you something. The reason this podcast exists it's because of you. Yes, you. You're like me? Yeah, you. Until next time, cha-ching.
Living Lchaim.